Greetings, everybody. Cryptodamus back here again. And I want to talk about some big astrological events that are coming up this weekend. In particular, we're going to talk about Saturn's ingress into the sign of Aries, which only happens once every 29 years in the 29-year Saturn cycle. So, this is a zodiac reset for Saturn. It takes Saturn 29 years to go all the way around the zodiac. And this is one of the biggest events of 2025 because Saturn only changes signs once every 2 to 3 years. But Saturn only changes signs from the last sign Pisces into the first sign in the zodiac Aries every 29 years. So that's kind of a big deal. And this is even a much bigger deal than usual because this will really begin the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries. So, first of all, let's just talk a little bit about Saturn moving into Aries and what that kind of symbolism means. I'm going to just, in this video, this is kind of like part one. I'm going to just talk about the ingress of Saturn into Aries, meaning Saturn really just changing signs and going into 0 degrees Aries. Then, of course, Saturn is going to stay in Aries for like 2.5 to 3 years. And that's a whole other sort of subject that we'll talk about in a separate video. Uh, but basically, it's kind of an interesting combination, right? It's somewhat of, what we could say like a mismatch between the energy of the planet and the energy of the sign. So that always creates a little bit of tension when you have a planet that has a very different agenda than what the sign has. And for example, of course, we know Aries is a Mars ruled sign. It's the god of war. It's also just a sign of confidence. It's a sign of courage. It's a sign of taking bold, decisive new action. Okay, but it's also it's a pioneering independent sign. Aries, it's a cardinal sign, so it likes to initiate new action, but it's really a kind of a short-term view. Aries. Aries likes to move from project to project, likes to initiate new projects, but it's not there for the long term. And this is one of the things that's really different between Aries and Saturn. So Saturn is not a bold, decisive action planet. It's a slow, thoughtful, steady, disciplined, focused, consistent action over time type of planet. So you can see that Saturn is going to slow down the energy of the sign of Aries, which is really, again, a decisive, action-oriented, initiating new projects. Now, Aries may actually have a bit of an fiery, enlivening effect on the planet Saturn, which is a very slow-moving planet that is a much more long-term thinking planet. So, in some ways, you could say, maybe that could benefit Saturn. But in other ways, you could say that there's just a kind of sort of a mismatch between the symbolism of Saturn and Aries. And of course, in the traditional astrology systems, Saturn is considered to be in fall in the sign of Aries. So it's one of its sort of like more suboptimal placements. It's called, debilitated in the sign of Aries. Of course, it's the opposing sign of Libra. We find that Saturn is in its exaltation, and the opposing sign to that is always going to be the sign of fall. So traditionally, Saturn is considered debilitated in the sign of Aries because it doesn't get along well. It doesn't do well in the Mars ruled signs. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting period. Now, the last two times, at least in my lifetime that Saturn was in Aries was in the late 1990s. This was ostensibly during the Clinton second term presidency. And then the time before that would have been in the mid 60s from, uh, I think it was 1967 through 1969. Which was obviously there was a lot more going on in that period. The late 1990s period with Saturn and Aries was kind of a time of peace and prosperity mostly. I think there were some skirmishes, in the Yugoslav civil war. Maybe stuff was still going on there. There was a lot of upheaval, in Russia and the kind of breaking apart of the Soviet Union with Boris Yeltsin and so forth. Um, some other events that took place, some really key events that took place, but overall, it was also the rise of the dot-com, the internet, the sort of the really the initial rise of the internet, and everybody knowing that the internet was going to change the world, but not really knowing how. Now, in the 60s, of course, Saturn and Aries was completely different. It was a much more tumultuous time of the Vietnam War. There was a lot of protests against the war on campuses and so forth. You also, of course, you had the hippie movement, the counterculture movement, an explosion in the music scene between 1967 and 1969. You had the big festivals of Monterey Pop and the Woodstock Festival, although I think that happened actually after Saturn went into Taurus. But you get the point that the counterculture was on the rise in the 1960s. Uh, just going back to Saturn moving into Aries in I believe it was April of 1996. There were just a couple of key events that might be worth looking at that we're going to look at here. So first of all, yeah, I just did a little Google search. So the Unabomber was arrested. That was quite a dramatic event. Ted Kaczynski, who had been on a bombing rampage for many years, he was arrested right as Saturn ingressed into Aries. Some of the other, oh, that's the 1960s one. Another one of the big sort of events of that time period was the Port Arthur massacre. Now, let me see. I think I have that up here somewhere. The Port Arthur massacre, which was a shooting spree that took place in Tasmania in Australia, and 35 people were shot by the shooter. However, it's interesting, right? Because Saturn, Aries rules guns. And Saturn moving into Aries initially did result in this terrible tragedy in Tasmania, but it actually led to a massive change and reform in Australia's gun laws. And there was, I believe there was a huge move for people to sort of like bring their guns in, and there was gun collections at many different places. This young man, unfortunately, but firearms are handed over as part of a buyback scheme in Australia, and that really ended up reducing gun violence in Australia. So that was kind of interesting. Um, I think in 1967, Saturn went into Aries on March 3rd. One of the interesting events that took place was Joseph Stalin's daughter defected to the United States right around that time, just a few days before that. Uh, the Cambodian Civil War was going on, sort of concurrent with the Vietnam War that was also going on. So that was interesting. There weren't any super dramatic events exactly, right around that ingress. There were ongoing campus unrest on college campuses due to the Vietnam War. So that wasn't really super dramatic. Um, so Saturn is going to go into Aries this Saturday, May 24th, and you can see it's going to really, officially sort of begin this conjunction with Neptune. It already was, in that conjunction with Neptune in Pisces, but now they're moving into Aries and they're getting a lot closer together. They're going to get within 13 minutes of a degree in July, and then that's going to go exact in February of 2026. So we're really entering the period of the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So Saturn's Aries ingress this time is a bit different because it's also really correlating with the Saturn Neptune conjunction. And the last time we saw that, as I've talked about in a few previous videos, was in 1988 and 1989. And that, of course, was the fall of the Berlin Wall and the beginning of the reunification of Germany and the beginning of the end of the Soviet Empire. Um, so, on March 30th, we had Neptune's Aries ingress. Now we've got Saturn's Aries ingress here on May 24th, and we've got the conjunction between Saturn and Aries will get to its closest about mid-July. Now, look back at the previous two times of Saturn and Aries for the stock market. It wasn't a huge financial it wasn't a huge financial mover. There wasn't a lot of tumultuous activity in the stock market on Saturn's ingress into Aries. So I'm not really expecting that, but you also never know because that 0 degrees Aries we can think of as an amplifier. It's going to amplify the energy of Saturn, as we saw with Neptune's Aries ingress. On March 30th, we saw the sort of a lot of confusion about the tariff policies that were coming out and this new 165-year cycle era. So this one is also, we could see some tumultuous events. We can't rule it out. It hasn't historically been a major factor for the for financial markets, but it's kind of a wait and see. It is an unknown, a bit of a wild card factor. I think there are more dramatic factors, in later in the month as we get into June, of course. We're going to have a very dramatic alignment in June, which is Jupiter's going to move into Cancer, and it's going to make a square, uh, to the Saturn Neptune conjunction. That's going to be one of the biggest aspect alignments of the year, and you can see that right here with Jupiter at one. Whoops, can't really zoom in on it too much here, but this is a really only about a month away or a few weeks away. Jupiter at one Cancer, it is going to make a square to Saturn and Neptune. This is another historic astrology alignment that's somewhat unprecedented. I have to look back to see. I don't remember off the top of my head the last time that Jupiter would have squared a Saturn Uranus conjunction. So this happens right around the June 18th, the next Federal Reserve meeting. So there could be some stuff in the markets then. This would be an alignment that I think would be much more a probability for some type of market volatility or chaos. But let's see what happens. The Saturn's, Aries ingress, and it will be at 0 Aries. Let's see here. I don't know why my ephemeris isn't working here. Oops, nope, that's not the right. Here we go. I don't know. Okay, here we go. So, yeah, so Saturn will be at 0 Aries from about May 24th, really all the way till June 8th or 9th. And so the 0 degrees Aries point is the key point that really we really should feel that sort of shift of Saturn going into that new era in Aries. Now Saturn's only going to stay in Aries for about 100 days. It's going to retrograde back into Pisces on September 1st for the rest of the year. And it's not going to go back into Aries until I think it's either January, February 2026. So this is just the initial visit of Saturn into Aries, and we don't really know exactly what to expect on that. So but that should give us some interesting angles on it. That should give us some interesting information to consider. And I hope you found this video useful. And again, we'll do another Saturn and Aries part 2 video looking at like the whole period. What were all of the events that took place in the previous 3 or 4 Saturn and Aries periods, not just the ingress. This was really focused about more on the ingress. Saturn's Aries ingress this weekend, this Saturday, May 24th. Let's see what happens. It's a wait and see, watch and learn event. This hasn't happened since 1996. Okay, everybody, great to see you. We'll see you soon next time.